Distinguished delegates, I call to order the 31st meeting of the Third Committee of the 73rd session of the General Assembly. I invite the committee to resume its consideration of Agenda Item 74, Promotion and Protection of Human Rights, and its sub-items. Distinguished delegates, this morning I am pleased to welcome Ms. Sheila Kitharuth, Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea. The committee shall now hear a report by the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea, Ms. Sheila Kitharuth. Ms. Kitharuth, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I address you as the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea. I'm honored to do this briefing for you for the 6th time, and it's my final briefing, in fact, in this capacity. The Human Rights Council extended the mandate for another year in Resolution 3815, adopted without a vote on the 6th of July 2018. I reached the end of my term of service on the 31st of October in just a few days. My successor has already been nominated and will start on the 1st of November. I wish her well in her upcoming role. First, allow me to congratulate the leaders of Eritrea and Ethiopia for signing a joint declaration of peace and friendship on the 9th of July 2018. The declaration has been reaffirmed on several occasions since then. Such an accomplishment raises expectations that the end of the no war, no peace stalemate will also impact positively on Eritrea's internal human rights situation. Secondly, Eritrea successfully campaigned to be elected as a member of the Human Rights Council for 2019 to 2021. It thus recognizes this institution's importance as the premier human rights body on the world stage. Such an achievement comes with weighty responsibilities. I would like to start with an update on the human rights violations I have documented since I addressed this committee in October 2017. However, the overall legal and institutional context remains unchanged. As a reminder, Eritrea still has no constitution, no independent judiciary or independent bar, no legislative assembly where laws are discussed, enacted, and questions of national importance debated, no institutionalized checks and balances protecting citizens from excessive exercise of state power, no free press, no space for people to express their views, no avenue for Eritrean citizens to voice their opinions on matters of grave importance. In short, the environment remains compounded by non-respect for rule of law and continuity in the existence of weak institutions with no signs that these are being addressed. Patterns of human rights violations amply documented in my reports and those of the Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in Eritrea persist. These are incommunicado and arbitrary detentions, death in custody, enforced disappearances, breaches of the rights to freedom of expression and religion, among others. According to reliable sources, on 17th of September 2018, Eritrea's former Minister of Finance was picked up forcefully on the streets of Asmara. Since then, no news has transpired regarding his whereabouts or his worrying state of health. His wife was arrested in January 2018 also without an arrest warrant or being charged with a recognizable offense. Her state of health also raises concern. In August 2018, over 300 water tanker owners, drivers, and other workers operating in the field of water distribution in the capital city of Asmara were arrested over a dispute about water prices. Reportedly, they were called for a meeting and ended up being arrested and detained. A few were released after paying hefty fines without appearing before a judicial or administrative tribunal. The majority, as we speak, remain in custody as they were unable to raise the fine money. Furthermore, Haji Musa Muhammad Noor, the late director of the Aldia school in Eritrea neighborhood of Asmara, was arbitrarily arrested and detained at the end of October 2017. He died in custody on the 3rd of March 2018. Several of those believed to have participated in peaceful demonstrations on 31st of October 2017 against the arrest and detention of late Haji Musa and other committee members were also arrested. Many of those were Aldia school students, their parents, including older people, women and children. Reportedly, security forces effected mass arrest of over 800 after the burial ceremony of Haji Musa Muhammad Noor on 3rd of March 2018. The Aldia School Committee members, as well as many of the people who were arrested during the 2017 or October 2017 protest after Haji Musa's funeral, are still in jail. While some children have been released, others were moved to several times until they reached a prison called Allah. Until now, parents have not been informed why their children were arrested. There are unconfirmed reports that some of the people arrested have been transferred to military training camps. The pattern of arrest detention remains the same. Mass arrests are carried out to instill fear. Prisoners are not allowed to exercise their fundamental rights to due process, to challenge the legality of their detention. Detained persons, including children, are kept incommunicado, and family members are not formally notified of the arrest and detention. I'm particularly concerned about children in Eritrean prisons. I would like to know from the authorities why those kids are still being arbitrarily held. When will they be released? And which measures are in place to protect them from abuse during arbitrary detention? During last year, people have contacted me about additional cases of enforced disappearances of their relatives since the early 1990s. They're still waiting to hear what happened to their loved ones, like this mother from Karen, who prays for the day she will be able to see her sons arrested in or about late 1999 and 2000. Her sons were in their early 20s when they were arrested and disappeared, not to be seen up to today. And forced disappearance is a crime, and perpetrators should be held accountable. With the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia reopening in September 2018, hundreds of Eritrean refugees have made their way towards reception centers along the border with Ethiopia. According to latest UNHCR figures, during the period 12 September to 12 October 2018, a total of 9,905 refugees were registered at the Endabaguna Reception Center, while 2,838 were awaiting registration. Amid earlier fears expressed by refugee population, Ethiopian authorities have indicated that they would respect their international obligation of non-refoulement. Eritreans are still expecting news about policy changes following the signature of the peace agreement. For example, Eritreans and the world are waiting to hear how the declaration of peace will affect the indefinite national military service. National military service is still in place, and conscripts have not yet been informed about any demobilization plans. Open borders have allowed the start of trade between the two countries. However, there are policies that are in place limiting the amount of money that Eritreans, including traders, can withdraw from their bank accounts. That is $5,000 per month. This policy has a negative impact on small traders, including shop owners, making it difficult for them to compete with incoming traders. Despite the open borders, Eritreans still require an exit visa to travel abroad, effectively restricting freedom of movement. For example, Eritrean bishops were unable to attend a meeting in Addis Ababa held in July this year. Their exit visas were not approved. I take note of Eritrea's membership to the Human Rights Council for the period 2019 to 2021, and Eritrea's government's voluntary pledge to that effect. Consequently, to actualize the key responsibilities which come with such a membership, Eritrea should cooperate with all human rights mechanisms, including by replying timeously to communications from special procedures mandate holders, as well as the country-specific one. Currently, Eritrea's record is far from exemplary. Extending a standing invitation to special procedures mandate holders to visit Eritrea and respond positively to pending visit requests by all special procedures mandate holders, some of which date to 2003. As you know, I did not get access to the territory. The third one is to protect from intimidation and reprisal those survivors of human rights violations, witnesses, civil society representatives, cooperating with the human rights organs, human rights defenders, both at the UN and regional level. Putting it succinctly, Eritrea has an obligation to protect those cooperating with human rights entities, including the Human Rights Council, and not to be the source of intimidation. The achievement of peace between Eritrea and Ethiopia must be duly celebrated. While it is yet to be translated into actual improvements of Eritrea's human rights situation, peace should be viewed as having the potential of ushering in a new beginning for the enjoyment of all human rights by all Eritreans. Put briefly, bring human rights at the very heart of peace, because progress in external relations must be reflected internally by bringing human rights home. As a second step, the Eritrean authorities would need to take stock and account for what has happened to whom, where, and when. Families of the victims of enforced disappearance should be informed about the fate of their loved ones. People languishing in Eritrean prisons, some for excessively long periods, including the G15 and journalists, and others arrested more recently, should be brought before the courts as a matter of urgency or released unconditionally without delay. These would be impressive peace dividends. Justice and accountability are twin pillars, reinforcing each other, on which peace can be built, strengthened, and security achieved. The impunity enjoyed by perpetrators of crimes against humanity and human rights violations remained an unrelenting challenge to be addressed through effective measures, the more so at this particular moment in time for lasting and sustainable peace. I would like to stop here, Mr. Chair, and I'm very happy to respond to any questions or bring in any clarification. Thank you.
I thank the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea for her statement, and I now open the floor for any comments and questions to her. I first give the floor to Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Special Rapporteur. Germany aligns itself with a statement to be delivered on behalf of the European Union. We would like to thank the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea for engaging with the Third Committee and want to reiterate our appreciation for your work and the work of the Commission of Inquiry. Allow us to underline that your mandate continues to enjoy our full support. Germany takes due note of the developments in Eritrea and in the region and welcomes recent steps in the peace process between Ethiopia and Eritrea. However, Germany remains concerned by the dire human rights situation in Eritrea. We encourage the government of Eritrea to demonstrate the necessary political will to improve the situation by taking serious, concrete and visible steps to implement legal and institutional reforms and by ending the unlimited involuntary conscription into its national service. We urge the government of Eritrea to free all political prisoners and to stop the continuing practice of arbitrary arrests and detentions. We are also very concerned by the fact that detainees are often subject to maltreatment, such as torture or inhumane detention conditions. We agree with the Special Rapporteur's recommendation to apply the United Nations standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners, the Nelson Mandela rules, with immediate effect. We strongly recommend the government of Eritrea to actively contribute to in-depth reporting by cooperating with the incoming mandate holder, starting by allowing the Special Rapporteur access to all parts of the country. Thank you.
I thank Germany. I now close the list and give the floor to Eritrea.
Mr. Chair, the negative impacts of the sanctions on the full enjoyment of human rights of all Eritreans cannot be understated. If continued, it will moreover harm meaningful regional cooperation and economic integration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the outset, I would like to commend the manner in which you are steering the work of the committee. Last week, under the agenda item, the promotion and protection of human rights, the third committee discussed the progress and gaps in the promotion of and protection of human rights worldwide. The takeaway from the discussion is that the promotion of human rights for all remains a challenging task for every nation, and that international partnership in addressing the issue of human rights is best served by constructive dialogue and not through politicization, double standards, and stigmatization. In these discussions, Eritrea shared its view on the broader issues of promotion and protection of human rights. Today, without engaging in acronyms, I would like to highlight the following. Mr. Chair, peace and security, development, and human rights are recognized as the three critical pillars of the work of the United Nations, each having an impact on the other. The respect for the rights of the human person sitting at the center of these intersections is enhanced or hampered by how much progress is made in each pillar. In this connection, with the new dawn of peace in the Horn of Africa, Eritreans are joyous and filled with strong sense of optimism, deservedly so, after enduring and overcoming decades of adversity through resilience. The mindset and the resources that were devoted and diverted justifiably to maintain peace and security for several decades will now be redirected to other vital sectors to accelerate socio-economic progress, consolidate rule of law, and strengthen national institutions. We are determined to accelerate our efforts to create a country where peace, justice, and democracy prevail, a modern and dynamic nation anchored on equitable development, social justice, and harmony. Mr. Chair, the leaders of the region are joining hands and redoubling their efforts to develop a shared vision and strategy to make up for the lost opportunities. This is a remarkable watershed in the region. The international community has welcomed the new developments as significant and historic. What is needed from the wider international community is encouragement and solidarity for the region to sustain peace and meet the aspirations of its people. the negative impacts of the sanctions on the full enjoyment of human rights of all Eritreans cannot be understated. If continued, it will moreover harm meaningful regional cooperation and economic integration. Consequently, countries in the region, members of the Council, as well as the Secretary General of the United Nations, are adding their voices to the calls for the lifting of the sanctions on Eritrea. The region views it as a hurdle that ought to be removed immediately to promote peace, stability, and prosperity. In this regard, my delegation wishes to take this opportunity to once again call on the international community and the Security Council to bring an end to unjustified sanctions, demonstrating to the people of the Horn that it is ready to accompany them on their road to progress. Mr. Chair, the UPR is the best tool to address human rights in all countries in a constructive manner. In full consideration to the UPR mechanism, Eritrea has submitted its third periodic report to the Human Rights Council, detailing achievements, challenges, and hard work to attain the higher standards in the respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Out of the 92 recommendations that Eritrea accepted during its second cycle, 8 recommendations, constituting 85.87%, are fully implemented, and 12 recommendations, constituting 14.13%, are partially implemented. Additionally, Eritrea is presenting its voluntary national report on the high-level political forum in 2009 to share the policies in place and the commitment that's needed in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, including Goal 16, which covers the promotion of peace, access to justice, and the development of effective and accountable institutions. Mr. Chair, before I conclude my brief remarks, let me extend my delegation's profound appreciation to all the countries that place trust and confidence on Eritrea to serve in the Human Rights Council for the 3 years, beginning January 2019. Eritrea is committed to fulfill its responsibility to the fullest during its mandate. It will endeavor to strengthen dialogue and consultation, to establish a balanced and inclusive approach to all issues and situations to advance the human rights agenda of the Human Rights Council. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Eritrea. Given the time limitations, I give 2 minutes per speaker. I now give the floor to Comoros.
Thank you, Chair. I will be making my remarks on behalf of the African Group on the oral report just presented by the Special Rapporteur on Eritrea. I hope that I will have more time than 2 minutes.
Oh, that way you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Ensuring universality, objectivity, and non-selectivity, as well as the elimination of double standards and politicization, is the only way to advance meaningfully international cooperation towards our shared goals and promoting and protecting human rights. Human rights of all countries should be addressed in a fair and equal manner, with full respect of national sovereignty and human dignity. In this regard, UPR is and remains the sole universally agreed mechanism to address the human rights situation of every member state through constructive dialogue. The African Group maintains strong positions against the politizations of human rights issues. Such practice is counterproductive and confrontational and serves no meaningful purpose on the promotion of human rights. The group reaffirmed its commitment to enhancing constructive international cooperation on the promotion and protection of human rights. The African Group welcomes the various initiatives that the government of Eritrea continues to take to further improve the human rights of its citizens, including the implementation of the Universal Periodic Review. The group also welcomes Eritrea's presentation of its initial and combined report to the African Commission of Peoples and Human Rights and its interaction with the Commission in May. The international community should recognize this development and support the government in its endeavor. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Comoros and now give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Special Rapporteur, the European Union thank you for your efforts towards the continued scrutiny of the human rights situation in Eritrea. We warmly welcome the recent peace agreement between Eritrea and Ethiopia, and we urge the Eritrean government to seize this opportunity to bring to an effective end the unlimited, involuntary conscriptions to national military service. The EU stands ready to offer practical support on the reform of national service and the creation of jobs to support demobilization. Madam Special Rapporteur, building on your report and its finding, we remain preoccupied by the human rights situation in Eritrea, and we agree that serious improvements are still much needed, requiring further steps by the government of Eritrea to fulfill its obligation under international law. Eritrea's election to the Human Rights Council comes with the responsibility to fully cooperate with the Council and other UN organs in the field of human rights. Members elected to the Council should also uphold the highest standards in the promotion and protection of human rights. We again call Eritrea to grant the Special Rapporteur unhindered access to the country and strongly encourage Eritrea to further strengthen cooperation with the Office of the High Commissioner, including through the establishment of an Office of the High Commissioner office in Eritrea. We welcome the government of Eritrea production of a midterm report regarding the UPR recommendation. We strongly believe that the process of working on concrete solutions to improve the human rights situation in the country must be strengthened and continued. We urge the government of Eritrea to take forward substantial legal and institutional reform in order to improve respect for human rights, including respect of land and property rights, including those of foreign community. Thank you.
Thank the European Union and give the floor to Greece.
Mr. Chair, Greece welcomes the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea and thanks her for her report. In aligning with the statement delivered by the European Union, I would like to make some additional remarks in my national capacity. Madam Special Rapporteur, I would like to express my country's support to the overall efforts that you have undertaken so far in order to achieve tangible progress in the full and equal enjoyment of human rights in Eritrea. In this vein, Greece encourages the competent authorities to intensify their efforts to actively engage on human rights at international, regional, and national level. Results-oriented and human-centered reforms are effective and sustainable instruments for the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights by every human being without any form of discrimination, as well as for the consolidation of public trust in the country's leadership, the rule of law, and national institutions. Madam Special Rapporteur, further, Greece calls on Eritrea to fully respect land and property rights, including those of foreign communities. Last year, the real estate property of the Greek community in Asmara, that is, the premises housing the honorary consulate of Greece, was confiscated by the Eritrean authorities. Such an unlawful act constitutes a breach of international law, according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the 1963 Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. Therefore, Greece requests Eritrea to bring to an end all arbitrary deprivation of property within its territory and return the building complex belonging to the Greek community in Asmara to its lawful owners. I thank you.
I thank Greece and give the floor to the United States.
Thank you. We are grateful for the UN's continued interest in the human rights situation in Eritrea. We strongly believe that improving the human rights situation in Eritrea will create more opportunities at home and reduce the number of people who flee the country every month, often at great risk to their own lives. We urge the Eritrean government to comply with its international human rights law obligations and to clearly communicate an end to indefinite national service obligations so that Eritrea's youth are able to pursue careers of their choice and contribute to the political, economic, and social development of the country. We call on the Eritrean government to take effective measures to ensure an independent and transparent judiciary, improve detention conditions, and release individuals arbitrarily detained, including prisoners of conscience, journalists detained for their work, and members of religious groups held on account of their beliefs. Special Rapporteur, have you seen any evidence that Eritrea's recent moves toward political reconciliation with its neighbors have made it more willing to address concerns over its human rights situation?
Thank the United States and give the floor to the Czech Republic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Czech Republic aligns itself with the European Union statement. We would like to welcome the Special Rapporteur and thank her for the presentation to the Third Committee. Madam Special Rapporteur, the Czech Republic welcomes your recent September statement on peace agreement between Eritrea and Ethiopia. We agree that the signed joint declaration of peace and friendship raised hopes that human rights will be at the center of Eritrea's path towards a society respectful of all fundamental rights. We see the current development as an opportunity for the government of Eritrea to improve the human rights situation in Eritrea and introduce at the domestic level reforms which are necessary for the way to democracy. The international community would welcome immediate release of all political prisoners, journalists and human rights defenders. The next step should be the organization of first pluralistic national elections after more than 20 years. Madam Special Rapporteur, has the government of Eritrea started to cooperate with you? Are there any prospects for your visits to Eritrea? Thank you.
I thank the Czech Republic and give the floor to Burundi.
Thank you, Chair. My delegation aligns itself with the statement made by Comoros on behalf of the African group. And here I wish to simply commend the cooperation of Eritrea with the UN mechanisms. We take this opportunity to welcome the agreement signed between Ethiopia and Eritrea. This is a historic act that is already contributing to bolstering security and stability in Eastern Africa. The international community must acknowledge these steps already taken by the country concerned and move towards a balanced and objective examination of the human rights situation there. Chairman, the Human Rights Council must abstain from any politicization and must prove their equality and objectivity in all situations that will help a country in its development. Thank you.
I thank Burundi and give the floor to United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United Kingdom thanks the Special Rapporteur for her report and for her efforts as Special Rapporteur over the last 6 years. The UK remains concerned at the human rights situation in Eritrea. Political developments in the region offer the chance for reforms by the government of Eritrea, and we would like to see clear plans for reform of the national service system with a clearly defined limit to periods of service, and that those detained for political and religious reasons should either be released or given due process. We look forward to the Universal Periodic Review in early 2019 and hope to see evidence that progress has been made by the government of Eritrea on the 92 recommendations they accepted from the 2014 UPR. We would welcome the Special Rapporteur's thoughts on how Eritrea could best utilize its membership of the Human Rights Council in support of reform processes. Thank you.
I thank the United Kingdom and give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Chairman. We carefully studied the report of the Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in Eritrea. We once again note that the examination of issues in Eritrea is being politicized and can hardly facilitate any improvement in the human rights situation in that country. We are against this approach. We reiterate our position that the question of the human rights situation in individual countries must be examined exclusively in a constructive manner with the full-fledged participation of the interested country. The best platform to do so is the Universal Periodic Review mechanism under the Human Rights Council. We wish to once again stress that in accordance with Resolution 60/251, it is the Council that is the mechanism for international cooperation on human rights. And equality, mutual respect, and constructive cooperation must be the basis for the Council's work. Thank you.
I thank the Russian Federation and give the floor to Cuba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cuba has always objected to imposing selective resolutions and mandates on countries, such as the case that we are dealing with now. This is an exercise which is clearly politically motivated and is not therefore compatible with the spirit of cooperation and dialogue which must be upheld and observed within this committee. We reiterate that the mechanisms of cooperation, such as the Universal Periodic Review, are the pathway that has been established for the analysis of a human rights situation in any country. Without a selective approach being adopted, Cuba will continue to oppose this type of politicized exercise. It does not reflect genuine concern for a human rights situation in a country and simply contaminates the analysis of an issue as crucial as human rights. Thank you.
I thank Cuba and give the floor to China.
Mr. Chairman, China has all along stood for addressing the differences in the field of human rights through constructive dialogue and cooperation. The international community should acknowledge the progress and achievements Eritrea has made in promoting and safeguarding human rights. As an important component of economic and social development in countries, the cause of human rights should be advanced in light of the country's specific conditions and the needs of the people. China calls on the international community to assess the human rights situation in Eritrea in a comprehensive, fair, and objective way and provide the country with constructive help in human rights capacity building according to the will and needs of the Eritrean people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank China and give the floor to the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Islamic Republic of Iran once again underlines its principal position concerning the report presented by the Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in Eritrea, that the duplicative practice of considering country-specific situation in the Third Committee of the General Assembly and exploitation of this platform for political ends is in breach of the principle of universality, non-selectivity, and objectivity, and non-interference in addressing human rights issues, and undermines cooperation and dialogue among governments as the essential requirements for promotion and protection of all universally recognized human rights. We reiterate our conviction that the UPR mechanism is the right venue for reviewing the human rights situation in all member states on an equal basis with full participation of the concerned governments. I thank you.
I thank the Islamic Republic of Iran and give the floor to Switzerland.
Mr. Chairman, Switzerland thanks the Special Rapporteur for her report on the human rights situation in Eritrea. Switzerland regrets that the Rapporteur has yet to have access to Eritrea and calls on the government to cooperate with her successor. Switzerland commends the rapprochement between Eritrea and Ethiopia with the signature of the peace agreement. Such a development can only be beneficial for the stability of the region. At the same time, we hope that this rapprochement and commitment for peace will have a positive effect on the human rights situation in Eritrea, which remains worrying. Comprehensive reforms at the national level are necessary so as to ensure a free, just, and democratic society where the citizens can enjoy all their fundamental rights. Switzerland continues to be concerned by the grave human rights violations and reiterates the importance of ensuring the respect and protection of human rights. Here, Switzerland recalls that states elected to the Human Rights Council commit to fully cooperate with the Council. Thus, Eritrea is called upon to cooperate with all human rights mechanisms, including the Special Rapporteur, and also to pursue its commitment to follow up on the recommendations of the UPR. Moreover, Switzerland encourages Eritrea to ramp up cooperation with the High Commissioner for Human Rights and to consider the establishment of an OHCHR office in Eritrea. Here, Switzerland reiterates its availability to continue dialogue and cooperation with Eritrea so as to improve the human rights situation in the country. Madam Special Rapporteur, following the promising developments in the Horn of Africa, what, in your view, are the priorities and opportunities that can bolster respect for human rights? Thank you.
I thank Switzerland and give the floor to Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My delegation aligns itself with the statement delivered by Comoros on behalf of the African Group. My delegation would also like to commend the Special Rapporteur for her remarks on the recent positive developments between Ethiopia and Eritrea. As my Foreign Minister highlighted in his statement as a General Assembly, There is a wind of change in the Horn of Africa, which has enormous implications for peace, security, and development of countries of the region. It is in this context that we need to look at the items under discussion. We hope this development will also have positive impacts in the field of human rights. Mr. Chair, Ethiopia welcomes the initiatives that the government of Eritrea continues to take to further improve the human rights of its citizens, including the implementation of the recommendations of Universal Periodic Review. Eritrea also presents its initial and combined reports to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and the Commission considered the reports during its session in May 2018. The report highlights the engagement and cooperation between Eritrea and the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights in areas such as administration of justice, persons with disability, and the right to clean and safe water. These engagements were also stated in the report of the Special Rapporteur, which was presented to the Council back in June 2018. In light of the following, while we encourage Eritrea to continue taking further measures in its efforts to respect, protect, and progressively fulfill its human rights commitments, we hope the international community will recognize these developments and support the government in its endeavors. I thank you.
I thank Ethiopia. We have heard the last speaker on my list. I would invite the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea to respond to the comments made and questions posed by the delegations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank each and every delegation, including Eritrea, for its remarks during this interactive dialogue. I would like to start by saying that as I mentioned earlier, the peace agreement is a potential for change, which needs to be exploited to the best of all the countries involved. If you recall, some time back in my first report to the Council and during my first ever interactive dialogue at this committee, I mentioned that the situation of no war, no peace between the two countries should not be a pretext for violating human rights inside the country. This is no longer there as an issue, which means that the potential for peace and respect for human rights is very much on the table, and which needs to be exploited, as I mentioned. However, unfortunately, since all the different violations that I mentioned are recent ones, violations with regards to arrest and detention, incommunicado detention. The list is long. I've just presented one case. And the list also of mass arrest. It's the same patterns. These are the kind of patterns which the country would need to deal with and to address in terms of how to give effect to its responsibility to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights violations according to its international obligations. So I have not, unfortunately, at this very particular moment in time, seen the first steps towards that. I've been asked about what would be the priorities. The priority number one is very simple for me. It would be open prison doors, allow people to go out, let people know where their loved ones are. There are some of them who are in prisons since the 1990s. Mothers want to know where their sons are. Fathers want to know where their sons are. Others, who have been in jail since 1994. And I'm thinking of young men like the Jehovah's Witnesses, because of their religious faith, have been, and there's no conscientious objection in the country, and were not in a position to bear arms, have been in jail since 1994. They were just in their early 20s then. They're now middle-aged men and don't even know what the internet is, for example, the advances of, in terms of human rights. So this is the first priority. The priority number one is to account for all those who are inside. Detention conditions. It's a simple one, an audit of who is where, what happened to them. And from there, implement the Nelson Mandela rules in terms of detention of prisoners. So it remains the first one for me. Lots of people have talked about, a lot of the delegations have mentioned about access, my access with regards to having access to the territory, and whether there is any sign that the new special rapporteur will have access, etc. It's very simple as far as I'm concerned. This is the opening, the moment of opening. And as Eritrea is now a member of the Council, the cooperation with members with special procedures should be on top of their agenda also. However, I'd like to reassure each and every member state that not having access did not in any way impede on the work I have done. I have been able to work on the human rights document all and report to the Council and to the Third Committee in a consistent manner. The other issue, I thanked the African group with regards to the statement made, but I would like to reassure them again that I'm in full agreement with the call that human rights should be looked at in a non-selective manner. And this is exactly what I've done. These are, in fact, real issues which are on the table and which need to be addressed. And this is exactly what I have been able to do over the last 6 years. I'd like to also, several delegations mentioned the UPR. And I would have liked to be in a position to give you more details on this particular aspect and on this particular area. However, I was given the assurance that a mid-term report was produced, and I looked for it all over, and it was not in any way publicly available. So this is why I have not been able to bring further information for the consideration of this particular committee. The other aspect I would like to raise, of course, is the issue of military service or national service. Still unlimited, still the same conditions apply, should have been 18 months, but no indication when and how things would change. I think the population is waiting to hear about that also, and the world. So it is the other priority should be addressing the issue of national service. Now, the other point I'd like to make is the borders were open. 9,000 plus people crossed the borders in 1 month. Surely, Mr. President, I'm sure many people in this room agree with me that they can't be running away from peace. So what are they running away from? These are things that all that they're running away from has been thoroughly documented in each and every report that I've written for the past 6 years, and which the Commission of Inquiry also documented, some of which amount to crimes against humanity. So it is important that these be addressed very seriously. Optimism, yes, I agree there is optimism, but 3 months down the line, Eritreans haven't heard much in terms of policy changes. They're waiting. So that's another area where there is, time is of the essence. The other point I'd like to raise is with regards to, no, I haven't heard, as I mentioned earlier, any clear plans that the national service would be reduced. We're still waiting for policy declarations on this particular issue. Property rights, I've heard one of the delegation mention the property of their own property in Eritrea. I'd like to raise the fact that there are also other property rights involved. The Afar people have been evicted without any compensation from the port area of Assab on the Red Sea. So also the policy of the country, which resettles different people in different areas, have also touched the territory of the Kunamas, for example. There are different other issues I would like to raise, but I'm looking at time and I see the President writing a note, and I know exactly what that note is. It is kindly conclude. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. Optimism, yes, quite a bit of it. Real action and concrete targets is what is needed at this particular moment in time. I thank you, but before I go, I'd like just 1 minute to thank each and every member of state members who invited me to their territories when I didn't get access to Eritrea. I would like also to thank each and every witness, every human rights person who's, who has experienced human rights violations, who trusted me to tell their stories. These are very important, and I was very privileged to have been the voice to bring it to the international community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I understand this is the last time you're here.
Yes.
And let me thank on behalf of myself and the entire committee for the hard work that you've done and for your excellent presentation here. Of course, I have to thank all the delegations for their participation in the interactive dialogue. Distinguished delegates, once again, I would like to thank Mr. Link, Mr. Rahman, and Ms. Kitharuth for their presentations, as well as delegations for their participation in the dialogues. The meeting is adjourned.